name is Philip Price. I practice with a law firm which was known before as Price and Flowers Law Firm, but it's changed as of January, which was yesterday's month, of Price, Flowers, and Ward. We practice in the sole areas of DUI defense and expungement. Perhaps George might tell you a little bit about expungement as he does his talk. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce my partner, George Flowers. I had the privilege just today of reading a transcript. I know you all were talking about different cases just a while ago and how judges act and this, that, and another. And I was actually really upset because we had an experience in the last 2 weeks where we had a judge. We're broken up into different branches of government: executive branch, judicial branch. Executive branch prosecutes cases, judicial branch acts as a independent arbitrator and neutral. We had a situation in the last couple of weeks where we had a judge remove his hat as a neutral arbitrator and share the hat of a prosecutor in a case and start asking questions that the prosecutor should have been asked. And that was done by George. Fought that battle very well as a gladiator in a suit. About, let's see, last century, 1999, I was on my way home around 5:30 in July, and I received a phone call from my colleague down in Montgomery. He's a DUI defense lawyer in Montgomery County. He says, "Phil," he says, "do you have a job opening?" He says, "I've got this young buck prosecutor down here that I can't win a case against him." And I said, "Well, actually, I do have an opening." And so I was taking flight lessons at the time, and that next Saturday we got in their airplane and flew down to Montgomery, had an interview. George was hired immediately. And he has been with me for 16 years now, and it is my pleasure to introduce you my partner, my friend, and one of the best lawyers I've ever known, George Flowers.
Thank you very much. I'd say it is always a tremendous pleasure for me to be here and get to speak to everybody. I feel that, to kind of quote Lou Gehrig, I feel that I'm one of the luckiest men in the world. I have a job that I love, and I get to live in a wonderful part of the country, and I get to meet super people. And one of the things that is so nice actually about what I do, and I mean this unquestionably from the bottom of my heart, is that I genuinely like the vast majority of the people that I actually get to meet on a daily basis. And at its core, what I do at the core is it's called criminal defense, okay? But really what I do is DUI defense. And that's, if you were to really ask me, what do you do for a living? I am a DUI defense lawyer. And we're very specialized in what we do. And we represent people that are, just quite frankly, that are people that could be sitting right here today, people from every walk of life. And they are people that are like me, they're people like you, and generally speaking, they are great people. And now, we occasionally get that person too, that I cannot stand. And you know what? That happens too. But we are going to have that in every occupation in the world. And I genuinely feel so lucky that I get to do what I do. I also like what I do. This area of law that we practice, it is an extremely technical area of law. It has more nuances to it than really just about anything you can come up with. And as far as following laws, and there's driver's license issues, and the way cases are resolved in this, and so it's a wonderful field, and I feel so fortunate and so lucky that Phil Price is the one that actually brought me in. And what he told you is true. It was years ago, and I remember getting a call from him and saying, will you meet me in the Montgomery County Airport tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock or something like that. And I had hair, I was thinner, all that. So I was like, "Yes, sir, Mr. Price." I went, I remember meeting him at 7 o'clock in the morning, And you know, I think by like I think it was like by 7:50 I had my resignation on my desk at the office I was working at back then. So, but it has been a great pleasure to come up here. Now, what we're going to talk about today, though, is we're going to talk about DUI generally and kind of fill you in on a lot of things, because a lot of people don't understand much about DUI. And one of the things that, as a lawyer who's trying to do a good job, is I want you to understand what a DUI is and what a DUI also is not, and kind of understand some of the history and things that go on with it, because this is a school. This is about education tonight, all right? And my goal here is that each and every one of you, when you leave here tonight, that you can go, oh, okay, you know what? I learned something from this. Now, the first DUI has been around for a long time, and DUI stands for driving under the influence, obviously. But it's been around for a long time, and in fact, the very first DUI laws actually came out in the late 1890s. And in fact, the first documented case of a person who got a DUI was in, I think it was about 1895, 1894, or something like that. And it's where a person crashed a car into a bank. And he was subsequently arrested, and then he got fined. In today's dollars, it would be about $2. You know, he got fined. I think at the time it was a few shillings, but you know, so it was a very low fine, probably comparable to something like a traffic ticket, a speeding ticket. So, in today. Now, since then, after that, the United States adopted DUI laws. And in fact, the first DUI law that we enacted here in the United States actually came out of New York. And there may be some people here that remember this, but the very first DUI laws that came around, there was the legal limits, and people have heard the phrase legal limits, and that stands for or BAC legal limits, and that stands for blood alcohol concentration legal limits, but it originally started out as a 0.15. And sometime in it was in the very early 70s, I want to say it was about 72, that actually then changed to a 0.12, and then after that it ended up changing again to a 0.10, and then it changed finally. Then it changed to what we have today, which is our 0.08. And I think a lot of people here are probably familiar, and you've probably heard that phrase before, of a blood alcohol level, you know, in the 0.08 number. Well, that's where that comes from. And this all comes from the National Highway Traffic Safety Board, which is the organization that actually makes these recommendations. And they make these recommendations for the government, and the government then usually adopts them, and then classically they'll tie highway funds into states changing their policies. So if you want to keep getting your highway dollars, then you adopt these federal policies. And that's kind of the way that it's always typically run. But at present, we're a 0.08 and dropping state. So now, and in fact, just to kind of show how things change, one of my favorite stories, and I love this, and I had a great guy for a dad, and he was a wonderful guy. And I remember when I first got into DUI, and I was actually a prosecutor, and I was just doing it. And I remember I went home for Thanksgiving. I was, you know, relatively new out of law school, and I had gone home for Thanksgiving, and we were sitting around a Thanksgiving table. And I remember my mother asking me about, you know, so what are you doing with this office now? And I explained it, and we're all sitting around there. And I remember, and I had my dad and my brother, 2 brothers, and my sister there, and he goes, I remember when I got my DUI. And everybody went, what? Nobody had heard anything about it at all. We were like, you what? And he goes, oh yeah, I remember when I got my DUI. You know, it's like 1940, I drove into a ditch. He said, you know, he goes, yeah, they ended up giving me a ticket and sent me home. He goes, I don't think they're as understanding about it as they used to be. Yeah, and I just remember, that's always rung to me, because I'm like, yeah, and I remember at the time I was going, yeah, Dad, I'm pretty sure they're not as understanding about that as they used to be. So, I also remember I had an uncle. His name was Drury, and my Uncle Drury, just to kind of show how mindsets have changed over the years. My Uncle Drury, his wife didn't like him to drink, okay, or she didn't like having liquor in the house. So he thought it was a great idea. He thought it was a really good idea that he would actually just store his liquor in his car. So, because his wife didn't like it being in the house, so he kept his liquor in the back seat of his car for when he went to his brother's office, and then he would have his drinks over his brother's office and that. Well, he got in a car accident one day, and one of his good friends saw it, happened to see it at the time, and pulled up right there, and and Drury was just like, "Oh yeah, I got in this accident and whatnot." And his friend, his name was Rabbit Rush, and Rabbit was like, "We got to get rid of this," and took all his liquor bottles out of the back of his car. Which I figure to this day that probably saved him from getting. He probably wasn't drinking, but that saved him to this day. I'm convinced that probably saved him from getting arrested, or at least getting some sort of problem there. Now, where we are now is, what I want to do is sort of explain, and what I want to do is kind of explain the way basically what our court system is now, and the way DUIs happen now, and basically explain to you what would happen if you end up getting arrested for a DUI, and just kind of go through that process with you. And then we're going to talk about, and then when we do that, then we're going to talk about where probably things are going in the future. Now, in Alabama, we have what's known as a two-tier court system. And what that is basically we're one of the few states that have that, and I believe it is actually a very good system. And it's a system where we have a right to a trial in a lower court. And this building that we're here in today, which is the courtroom for the municipal court for the city of Huntsville, it is one of our lower courts. And now, I often use the example when I'm explaining this to people because they don't get it, but a lot of people here will get it. But a while back, there used to be this TV show that was on, and it was called Night Court. So, people remember that? Yeah, that's right. We all used to watch that show. Now, when I get kids, if I get anybody under 30, they don't know what the heck I'm talking about on that show. But you know what? You get anybody that's about 35 and older, they remember that TV show, Night Court. And I actually explain to people that that's probably one of the most realistic law shows that I've ever seen. Okay? And people don't get that. They think that's funny and I'm joking, but I think it probably is one of the most realistic law shows that I've ever seen on TV. And if you'll remember in that show, it was always just the judge standing there. Then it was the judge only on the bench, and he made the decision. And then we had a bald bailiff over on the side, and then the mean defense attorney, and then the mean prosecutor, and the nice defense attorney, which would be me. So, but in that show, that was a show about a municipal court for New York City, where it was bench trials only. And if you remember from that show, things moved very quickly. And there was always, kind of the crazy cast of characters that constantly went through. And that is actually the way most municipal courts really do honestly work. Things go very quick. They're judge trials only. Now, if we're happy with that decision, and we're happy with what a judge does at the lower court, then we can stay with that, or we can. But if we're not happy with that, then you have a right to appeal that judge's decision, where your case then goes to what's known as the circuit court. And at the circuit court, that's where you have a right to a trial in front of a jury. And that's the court that most people actually think about and that we kind of watch on TV, that it's a much more formal setting, and people scowl at each other, and there's much more drama involved and that sort of thing. Now, a case starts, and they all start the same way. Every DUI case always starts with the same thing. It always starts with a person getting arrested. And typically, if we talk about just a classic DUI, your classic DUI that I see, and we see lots and lots and lots and lots every year. And our classic DUI typically starts off with some pretty innocuous event. It may be a speeding ticket. It may be some minor weave in the road, or where somebody touched a fog line. It could be one of the classics that I just always just call BS on. I just think it's absolutely total crap. But anyway, is no tag light. I have never seen a no tag light violation in my years as prosecutor, as defense attorney. I have never seen a no tag light violation that didn't accompany a DUI. So, well,
One that didn't accompany a DUI.
well, then they thought they were hunting you, and they thought you were going to get a DUI, is what it was. So,
It was a highway patrol.
yeah, well, basically, that is like your classic, we're hunting, we're out looking for DUIs. So, ticket. Or it starts with also with a roadblock. And a roadblock, and that's something that's very applicable to people in North Alabama. And I think most people that have lived in this area, and people that have lived in most areas, you have to go through a roadblock every once in a while here. Now, and so we'll just use the example for our purposes of a couple going home and they run into a roadblock somewhere. Well, what happens is you approach this roadblock, and I would say this, there are lots of regulations, there are rules, there are regulations for how these roadblocks are supposed to be set up. And the reason why is because you're not stopping a person for a criminal activity. You're not stopping them for any reason. You're stopping without any suspicion of them having done anything wrong whatsoever. And so constitutionally, these things are supposed to be set up in a very controlled and very specific manner. And I could say I have never seen a roadblock case where there were not issues in there about the way these things are set up and the way that they are performed. I have seen roadblocks, and I don't think this will ever happen. I think this was one end of the spectrum, okay? But there have been roadblocks set up by one cop carrying a rifle that decided he's going to set up a roadblock, and he stops all the cars coming through an intersection, okay? Without any supervision whatsoever. I have seen roadblocks. I'd say one case I had, it was last year, and this was an aberrant. It will never happen again. It was just one of the luckiest things that I ever hit on. It was a roadblock case. It was actually here locally, and it was set up, if you'll notice, out in West Huntsville, the city limits go in and out quite frequently out there. And this particular one was actually set up at the very bottom of where Indian Creek goes when you just pass Providence. Well, what nobody realizes is that right there at the bottom of Indian Creek, there's a little space carved out where it's the county right there. And so, it was one of those where it just hit, and they actually set the entire thing up 10 feet away from city jurisdiction over here, and about 10 feet away from city jurisdiction over here. But, and it was extremely, extremely close. There is absolutely no doubt that it was very close. But close doesn't count. We were very fortunate to get a judge that actually believed close doesn't count either as far as the law goes. So we were actually extremely lucky on that one. But what happens is a person will end up getting stopped for something. And then what happens is when you do, then you approach this, and you are, in all likelihood, it is extremely likely you're going to meet some cop that's right there who's going to be, roll down your window, let me see your driver's license. Well, what's really happening here is, it's supposed to be driver's license check and an equipment check, okay? Well, what they're really doing is they're, probably at this point, they're trying to smell for alcohol at this point. And if they smell something, okay, then they are extremely likely, and it doesn't always happen, but it is extremely likely they're going to say, pull over to the side of the road. And so what would happen is then, at that point, if you have any sense at all, you would pull over to the side of the road. Now, I would also encourage all of you, and I would encourage people that were watching this later, there have been a series of videos that have come out on YouTube that I genuinely find comical. As a DUI defense lawyer, I find these videos hilarious about people that think that they want to, they know their rights at a roadblock, and they're, you can't make me roll down my window, you can't stop, you can't da-da-da-da-da-da, you can't this, you can't that, at these roadblocks. And you know what? By gosh, someday down the road, some judge might decide, well, you know what, he was right. Maybe that officer shouldn't have done that. But I can almost guarantee you that is one of the fastest ways that anybody is ever going to go to jail, ever, by hanging a little sign on their window, going, do not accost me, officer. I exercise my rights under the Alabama Constitution. You may not stop my vehicle or whatever. I guarantee you it's not going to work, okay? And it's just going to be so much more headache than it's probably ever worth for people to do that. And but I find it really funny when these videos come out and people advocate that sort of thing. And like I said, someday, you know what, some judge may say they were correct, okay? But in the meantime, the headache value, I can't imagine is worth it for the average citizen. Now, but what will happen is you get out, and then they're going to ask you to step out of your car. Well, when they have you step out of your car, at this point, you know you're probably in trouble, okay? Because at this point, what's going to end up happening is, probably the first thing that's going to happen is they're going to pull out this little thing that's about the size of a pack of cigarettes, and it's got this little white tube on the top, and it's a little handheld device that's designed just to confirm presence of alcohol. All right, and so they're going to ask you to blow into this little thing. All right, now that little device actually is not admissible in court, and so I never actually genuinely give that much concern over that thing, but that's probably the way that they're going to start this thing out. And it's pretty much at that point that in most cases I believe that officer's mind is already pretty much going to be made up on how he's going to be handling this case. At that point, he's going to start trying to ask you to do what are known as field sobriety tests. I like to call them roadside gymnastics, because that's what I really think they are. They are a series of tests that are designed to measure your balance and coordination out in the night in the middle of the road with police cars and under this situation. That most of the documentation and the studies about these kind of tests, by their own standards, 1 out of 4 people can't do them under ideal circumstances, all right? And there's numerous other criteria that create problems with anybody doing these tests. And now, am I saying that they're completely valueless? Absolutely not. You will never hear me say that anything about this stuff, okay? In my opinion, when any lawyer gets up and they're talking about DUI and they said, oh, this is total bunk or this is total bunk, well, I generally think that is wrong, okay? There are bases to a lot of things, but the main problem with these roadside gymnastics that they have you do is that they are extremely subjective, and they are subjective in the extreme. And what happens is most police officers, and I think this is true for most, I think most see what they want to see, and they believe what they want to believe, and that their minds get made up early on, and thus there is not much you can do. It is, I remember the time, and I've told the story before, but one of the best examples that I have of this was when I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I remember my friend Doug came over to my house, and I was probably 14 years old, and I was in a small town called Dothan, Alabama, and we had just moved, my mother and I had just moved to Dothan, Alabama, and I had met a friend, and his name was Doug, and he had come over to my house and on a Friday afternoon, and we played, and then Doug's mom, because it got dark, Doug's mom came and picked him up and went home. Well, the next day, my mom was going to send me to the shoe store to actually buy some new shoes. Well, and she said, well, here's, take my credit card, go to the shoe store and go buy some new shoes for whatever. I said, yes, ma'am, no problem. And I thought, well, you know what? I'll take Doug's bike back to him on the way home. So I'm pedaling my bicycle, and I had my friend Doug's bicycle right here where I'm pedaling. And, I got probably maybe 10 minutes from my house, and it's a small town, and I was an unknown quantity. And I got about 10 minutes from my house on my bike, and I got blue lighted. This cop stopped me. Immediately, he was convinced that I had stolen this bicycle. And there was absolutely nothing that I could say in the world to convince him that I had not stolen this bicycle. Well, I got sat down on the curb and I got frisked, and then what happened? He finds this credit card in my pocket. Well, at that point, he was convinced I had robbed a house. And at this point, he was absolutely convinced I had robbed a house, stolen credit card, where's this house you'd gone into, broken into, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then about 3 other patrol cars showed up on the scene, okay? And I mean, I'm just in tears. I couldn't believe it. You know, I mean, I didn't know what to do. I'm just crying for my mom, you know, at this point. And anyway, and I went to whatever the juvenile detention home is, or whatever it is, you know, whatever it is at that era. Now, you know, but that is an example of, and I think that happens. That sort of thing, that's not a unique to George thing. I'm telling you, that sort of thing happens, and it happens to everybody. I remember, you know, there was a time when I was a kid, my sister, there was a time when I was a kid, and I forgot what happened, but I made my sister mad about something, or I didn't. I don't even remember what happened, but my sister smacked the crap out of me with a wiffle bat, okay? And just came up, and I forgot. I'm sure I did something. I know I did something, but it was so, I always did something. I mean, but anyway, but I don't remember. But she came up, and she just smacked me right on the side of the leg with this wiffle bat. Well, you know, what am I going to do, right? If she smacks me, I think I was about 9 years old at this time. She was 15 or whatever it was. And so, well, I'm 9 years old, and I just got beat by my sister with a wiffle bat. What am I going to do? Well, I'm going to smack her with the wiffle bat. So I pick it up, and I start chasing her. We're at my grandmother's house, and I'm chasing her, and she starts screaming, you know, no, stop, ah, ah. My grandmother's working in the garden. Well, all my grandmother sees is us coming around the corner with me with a wiffle bat chasing after my sister. Well, then I got another beating for that. So we can't help it. I mean, that happens to us in life, okay? And people do that, and by no means do I think that, you know, we are all shaped by our experiences, by our past and our experiences and what we see. And so what happens is when police officers, in my opinion, are doing these tests, I think they're so used to seeing a certain element, and they're so used to an us against them mentality, that I do believe that what happens is, in the vast majority of cases, they see what they want to see. Now, but what would happen is, for any of you, is the first thing that would happen is they would probably tell you, is they would say, now, Mr. Flowers, and they would give you the instructions, and it would be substantially like this. They would say, now, Mr. Flowers, I want you to come stand in this spot. Well, you know what? I'm not taking it all that time. Okay, fine, you know, and I'll go, and fine. Now, I want you to stand with your feet together and your hands down to your side. Don't move from that position until I tell you to move. Do you understand? And I'd go, yep, no problem. And I'm probably standing there. Heck, I might put my hands in my pocket. You know, I may do any other things. Now, stand in that position. What I want you to do is, I want you to do not begin until I tell you to begin. What I want you to do is, beginning, I want you to place your foot in front of your other foot, taking a series of 9 steps, touching heel to toe, keeping your hands to your side. Count each step out loud. On the 9th step, I want you to take a series of small steps to making a turn 180 degrees, where then you will take 9 steps, touching heel to toe on the way back. Do you understand my instructions? Yes, I do. At no point do I want you to stop. Do not stop walking. If you stop walking, then continue on. Do you understand my instructions? Sure. Okay? Well, it happens pretty much along those lines. And what you don't realize is that you are not being graded on a standard of objective, normal standards. What you're being graded on is absolute meticulous perfection. And that is the way that these tests are graded. Something as simple, I'll give you a great example of things that I've seen. You know, he put his hands in his pocket. He, you know, instead of standing with heel to toe, you know what? He moved to a more relaxed position. I have seen, you know, people that go, okay, am I supposed to do it like this? He started too soon. You know, when these tests happen, the number one things people probably do wrong when they're trying to perform these tests is they don't realize how they're being graded. And that happens, they do not realize that literally anything that you do that is not strictly with what the officer just told you is going to be is going to be treated as something you did wrong. So you will do that test. You'll ask, did I do okay? He won't tell you. All right? So then he'll say the next one to you. He'll tell you, now, what I want you to do is stand in the spot, Mr. Flowers. I want you to put your hands to your side. Do you have Do you have any problems with your back, your legs? You know, he may say, do you have any medical issues? He may say, he may or may not ask you that question. Now what I want you to do is take the foot of your choosing. I want you to raise it approximately 6 inches off the ground. I want you to point your toe, keeping your hands to your side. Do not put your foot down. If you put your foot down, I want you to raise your foot back up. I want you to continue to begin counting 1001, 1002, 1003, so on and so forth, or until such time as I tell you to put your foot down. Do you understand? So it'll be instructions such as something along those lines, all right? And basically, what will happen is if a person is not able to then stand on one foot, holding their foot 6 inches, not 10 inches, not 2 inches, but 6 inches off the ground while pointing their toe and balancing, then they're going to count that against you, all right? It is, and speaking of those kind of tests, it is absolutely, and I'm right, I guarantee you, I could pick any number of people out of this group, and you would not, you would not be able to perform those tests and pass with me. Do you know why you won't pass with me? Because it's a subjective test, and I don't want you to pass. And you know what? On any test where I don't want you to pass, then you will not pass. You will not. It will not happen, okay? I can pick anything. I can pick any number of things. I'm good enough. I've done it long enough. I can pick lots of things that you will do wrong on this. But, and I can also give you the instructions in ways that will make it more difficult for you to do it. And that can very well happen as well. So what will happen is, I'm going to do questions at the end. So we will, these sort of things happen. Now, after this, then they very well may end up doing a test where they hold a pen up in front of your face, you know, and they'll say, follow the tip of my pen, don't move your eyes, and they'll kind of move it around like this. I have never seen one in Alabama. There is a basis to that test. And there's very strict rules for how that's supposed to be performed properly as well. I've actually never seen an officer on video ever do that test correctly on how that they're actually taught to do, or how they're actually supposed to do that test. And there may be some other ones that come in, okay? And you know what? You may be lucky, and you may have an officer that actually pays attention to you. For instance, you may have somebody that when you say, look, man, I can't do that. I've got, you know, this or that. But I don't think I can do that. He might go, you know what, I understand. I have seen that. I've seen that with some officers before where they go, okay, I understand that. And they go to do some different things. But I would say this, 9 out of 10 or probably 19 out of 20 do not pay any attention. They just say, okay, I'll take that into consideration. And then they just move on exactly like they would. One of the most outrageous ones that I've had, and this is one that I just get worked up on. I just get so livid over it. And it happened within the past year, and I think it was, I had a case where it was a DUI case, and the officer said, okay, do you have any medical problems? You got anything that would prevent you from doing these tests? Okay, whatever standard phraseology would be, okay? And, I think he may have said, are you okay or whatever? And, this person, I think, generally said, yeah, well, I've got a broken arm, and it was, this young lady had a big green cast on her arm from here. Her arm was broken in 2 different places. Compound fracture broken in 2 different places. Had a cast on from here to right here. And the officer still having her do, all these same instructions, same everything. It was absolutely ridiculous to think that anybody in that circumstance, at that point, why couldn't you just go to something where you're asking the person to do something that doesn't have to do with them trying to balance when they've broken their arm a week earlier. So, and I'm going to actually come back to that because that was a really, and that was actually a pretty interesting issue. But you'll do these tests, they'll have you do this, and then at this point, the officer's probably going to place you under arrest. Now, in Alabama, there are 5 different ways that you can be charged with a DUI. You can be charged with a DUI for alcohol, which is basically, and we'll just put it this way, it's a DUI of impairment, of alcohol impairment, a DUI that has to do with a straight blood alcohol level, and that's that .08 that we're talking about, a DUI for controlled substance, a DUI for when it's a combined influence and where they think it is alcohol and a controlled substance, and or a DUI is called an other DUI, where it counts as an other substance. All right. Now, I've used my story about an other DUI. I had an other substance is a DUI where it's not a controlled substance, and it's not alcohol, and it's not a controlled substance. And so, this was the case from several years ago. And as we all know, all prescription medications are not controlled substances, right? Okay, of course, we know that. Well, this officer charged somebody with an other DUI, and so we get ready. We're getting ready to try this case, and we try this case, and the other substance that he has alleged is Viagra. So is under the influence, and so he's alleging that this guy apparently has taken too much Viagra to be able to properly drive that evening. Those are your other substance DUIs. Your controlled substances are things that are on a controlled substance list, and your alcohol DUIs are very obvious, and that's from your classic Otis Campbell from Andy Griffith drinking and driving type DUI there. Now, what will then happen is after you've been placed under arrest, then you end up winning an all-night stay at the Madison County Bed and Breakfast for a night, which is probably the worst yet most expensive place to spend the night that you will ever find. And it's at this point that an officer will ask you to take a breath test, typically at the jail. And it doesn't always happen, but it's very common that they then ask you to take a breath test down at the jail. And at this point, people get asked that question. It's a very common question. People get asked, okay, should I take the breath test or should I not take the breath test? And so a lot of times, I can't tell you how many cases I've had over the years, and I don't tell people whether they should or they shouldn't, because that's not what I do, that's not where I am. And you know what? I don't want people saying, well, I don't want somebody who's had half of a drink 3 hours ago to then go, well, gosh, I'm just not supposed to, okay? But I can tell you, I have heard the story over and over and over again from people from years and years and years who heard some lawyer say, oh, never do it ever, all right? I don't say that, but people say that sometimes, and people hear it, and they just automatically think that's what they're supposed to do. And sometimes people go, I had one drink. I may have had one drink, X amount of time ago, and you can calculate people's blood alcohol level based on what their body weight, their gender, and what they drank, and over the time frame. And I've had numerous cases over the years where people, I think what they have come back and they have said, my gosh, I wish I had known. I wish I would have done that at the time, but they don't do it because they don't know any better. Now, I also have lots of people that have gone in there and blown, that have blown .08 or higher, or blown .15 or something like this, and then they have obviously gone, oh my gosh, what was I thinking? Why did I do that? So, but that's why I generally don't tell people on what they should or should not do. I let people they need to make that decision for themselves based on what they know about themselves for the evening. But, and it's at this time that then the cop probably is going to be writing his arrest narrative for that evening. That's going to go into what's known as discovery. And in fact, I'm going to go back to the green cast case. And these arrest narratives, that's where the officers write down these cases, or they write down the things that they think are important about the evening, okay? And they're trained, it's part of their training that they're supposed to write down everything that they think is important about the facts of that evening that would help. For instance, in the green cast case, wouldn't you think that this person had a broken arm might be something that would be important to know? Don't you think that's something that a prosecutor, like I said, let's just take it out of the officer. Let's just say I'm the prosecutor in a case. Isn't that something that I think I would probably want to know in the interests of fairness, right? So, that was why it's interesting sometimes what things end up being left out of an arrest narrative. And in fact, doing defense work, I actually find the things that are left out of narratives to be far more interesting than the things that are actually placed in the narratives. I think they're actually very often far more telling about what a case, what would happen with a case. Now, later on, you're going to bond out of jail. Typically, about 12 hours later, a person's going to end up bonding out of jail. And that's probably about an average length of time that a person stays in when they end up getting arrested. And then you'll end up getting set for an arraignment, and you'll end up getting set for a trial date later on. Now, hopefully, your case would never have to go to trial. But in the meantime, there would be what's known as a discovery process, and that's a very, very important process here. The discovery is a lawyery term that means show me the evidence. Okay? And one of the most interesting things that I always enjoy getting is we request videotapes in every single case. I find years ago, 20 years ago, a videotape was a rarity in a case, and there almost never were. In fact, they don't even make videotapes anymore. I don't know why I got to get away from saying videotapes. But recording video, 20 years ago, there was no video that was done in any of these cases. And I am such an advocate, I am an incredibly staunch advocate of video. I don't know why people wouldn't want our officers to be videoed, and it doesn't have anything to do, it has any number of things. It does have to do with protecting the officer, it has to do with protecting the citizens, it has to do with simply recording the facts as they exist. We hear so much about that stuff now, and almost not a week goes by that in the news now there's not something about some sort of video encounter. And that's the era that we're in. It is never going to go away. And people go, well, why didn't we hear about a lot of these things? And why didn't we hear about a lot of these things from years ago? Well, the truth of the matter is I truly believe, I don't believe anything's drastically changed. In fact, I think law enforcement is probably more well-trained, and I think law enforcement now is more well-trained and does better cases than they did 20 years ago when I first started as a DA. I do believe they do a better job now, and I think a large part of that is based on the fact that video is commonly recorded. One of the worst examples I can think of came out last year, and it was a case in, I think it was either North or South Carolina, where it was just caught, on tape on video of an officer that shot somebody in the back as they were running from him, and there may have been a brief struggle, and then he was even caught throwing his taser down on the ground. And were it not for video, nobody ever would have heard of that event. Nobody would have ever known anything about that. And so I am an incredibly staunch advocate of it. Huntsville, I'm actually very glad. The city of Huntsville is also going to a body cam system. Now, I don't know if it'll happen, but I know that they're actually testing out body cameras now. I think those are great because dash cams can only record so much. You have to have cars facing those peoples, and a body cam, you tend to get audio and the video in a much better situation now. So if they're off camera, also for officer safety as well. And it's very rare. It's unusual. You don't really hear people. You don't hear complaints about it, but I find it interesting to see who advocates the common use of videotapes, and typically it's from citizens' rights groups are the ones that are saying, put cameras out, put cameras out, put cameras out. You rarely hear the Fraternal Order of Police demanding more video cameras, okay? But, and I can say, I think it is a great thing for law enforcement. I am genuinely glad they're doing it. Now, I want to talk a little bit about, and I'm running short of time, and so I want to talk a little bit about kind of where I think things are going here on the DUI case. As of 2 weeks ago, and I've got my fingers crossed for this one, I'm hoping it happens. I'm saying bring it on into Alabama. But as of about 2 weeks ago, the National Highway Traffic Safety Board has put out its wish list of things we'd like to see. One of them is a .05 legal limit gone nationwide. Now, I am in favor of that because I think that would be absolutely ridiculous, and I think that would be, once again, we're talking about, at that point, we're talking about a one drink limit. Some states have already got this. Okay, some states have lower than .05 type DUIs, but I think it would be. I'm actually, for selfish reasons, I kind of hope that happens in Alabama. But also, I think one of the things we're looking at are legal limits on drugs, and the drug DUIs. I can tell you that's something that there are so many more drug DUIs now that happen than ever used to happen 20 years ago. All my drug DUIs now, it is amazing. They're all now either marijuana or pills, and I think the pill issue is tremendous. The access to them that people have nowadays, when you can just order Loratab off the internet, but it is so subject to abuse. But it's amazing. But all the drug DUIs now are pill cases or marijuana cases, and typically your marijuana cases are incredibly. They're typically based on, I found marijuana on him and I could smell marijuana emanating from the vehicle. I mean, they're typically very, very, very poor cases. Alabama has recently enacted what's known as an enhancement provision, and they commonly call it the super drunk, which is basically a doubling of penalties based on certain blood alcohol levels. And we've also recently brought in something that's called the interlock, which is, I can tell you, I put an interlock in my car when these things came out. And what this is this is a gizmo that you put in your car, and it won't let your car crank unless you blow into this, basically a breathalyzer that you wire into your ignition system, okay? And it won't let your car crank. Just to see what they were like, I actually went and got one. I intended to get it for a month, and I just said, I'm going to have this sucker. I'll tell you what, it was absolutely amazing. I took a trip in my month, I took a trip to Birmingham. I had to blow in this thing 9 times between here and Birmingham and back, while I'm trying to drive my car and blow into this thing at the same time. I live maybe 5 miles from work, and I never made it to work without having to blow twice. Once when I started, and then it caught me on the way down, so I never actually made it. So it is incredibly onerous, these things. I commonly tell people, I've had a few people that say, hey man, instead of losing my license, can I just get one of those things? And I'm like, dude, if you got a chance between eating 90 days on a license or having that sucker for 2 years, go get some cabs. It'll cost you less money, and it'll be way less headache, or get a ride for 90 days. But those are going to happen. I actually saw very recently in the news that one car manufacturer was talking about making those mandatory, like as part of I think it was some sort of passive alcohol sensor that were going to be wired into steering wheels or something. And I was just like, Lord, the hand sanitizer industry should just kill that one if that ever comes up. So anyway, but I've actually run out of time, but I will be happy to answer a few questions after. Yes, sir.
Why don't they come up with a test at the scene where you can blow into something and tell whether you're .08 or less, instead of arresting you and taking you?
Well, the question is, why don't they have an alcohol sensor that they can use on the scene? And they actually do have that, okay? This little, and I'm going to make this a very quick answer, but the little gizmo that is about the size of a cell phone that has a little tube that they'll put on the top, sometimes some of those are for detection, some of those give a reading. Now those are not admissible because those tests are extremely inaccurate, and if you're chewing gum or you have any sort of form of mouth alcohol in your mouth whatsoever, you're going to get a false positive and a falsely high reading. And that's why those are generally disfavored in Alabama. So next, yes, sir.
What's the cost to accept the DUI and the fines and stuff, and then what are the penalties, and then what are the costs to fight it in court?
Well, here it is. We're going to run out of time on that because that question is what are all the penalties? I'll put it this way. There are so many permutations that I have a whole seminar that I do on permutations based on number of arrests versus blood alcohol level versus occupancy, etc. So there's it would take me 10 minutes to literally go through every permutation.
Well, let's don't do that, but let me also mention, wasn't it your law that went to the Supreme Court and had the breathalyzer declared unconstitutional?
Yes, in fact, that was actually Phil for the previous breath test machine, which was known as the Intoxilizer 5000. So, I tell you, it was pretty funny. About a year ago, in one of our neighboring jurisdictions, and we've moved on to a different breath test machine since then for 20 years. But there was a neighboring jurisdiction of ours that had not updated their municipal ordinance, and in trial we went and they tried to admit their current breath test machine, and I was like, nope, you guys still have the Intoxilizer 5000 on there, and they're like, what? Oh, it was hilarious. City council met like 2 days later, update their ordinance. Anyway.
So your question is, what does it mean when the judge says to your objection, he says overruled? That means you didn't win. If he says sustained, that means you're doing good, and then the other side can't do what they wanted to do in your case. But we were talking about judges. George and I were a little while ago, and we were talking about judges' latest rulings. Stare decisis, things like that. What does all that mean? And it means the latest ruling in a particular case is what the judge is supposed to do in your case, if it's an identical case. And so we were arguing this case one time, and I kept saying, Judge, but this and this, and this is what you must do, and whatever. He went, bam! He said, Alan, I just overruled you. You got anything later than that? So those are the kinds of things you put up with. And I always think about the Charlie Hooper moment when he was a prosecutor and somebody like Phil was the defense attorney, and the drug addict had not done what he was supposed to do prior to trial. He had stayed on his drugs or whatnot. And so Charlie Hooper said, well, I'm just going to reluctantly, I know I said I would recommend probation, but I'm just going to reluctantly recommend probation. And Judge Snodgrass looked at him and he said, well, I'm just going to reluctantly grant it.
Take a case on a contingency fee basis, and typically that's a case where a person has money that they believe that they're entitled to. Cases such as a collections case, a car wreck case, medical malpractice case, those are the types of cases that you can take under a contingency fee basis. There are different types of cases, for example, in an alimony or a child support type case where you cannot take a contingency fee based on what you recover, but instead you would work by the hour. Contingency fees can range anywhere between typically a third up into about a half of the total recovery. There are certain cases that you'll hear about, for example, Social Security disability, that have limited fees where the attorney can only recover 25% of whatever they've collected on the back pay, or even in a workers' compensation case where they're limited to 15%. And some of that's governed by statute as well as other applicable law.
The hardest thing for me is people often say, how do you defend somebody that's guilty? And that's an easy question. The greatest generation, greatest group of men ever gave us a Constitution, United States Constitution. And it says the government's got to do certain things. Prove you're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You have presumption of innocence. And there's nothing easier in the world for me than to defend a guilty person. Because then I feel like I'm doing a civic duty for the community, making the government go through their paces to prove my client's guilty. Now, I generally try to focus and specialize on innocent clients, and those are always the tougher ones, because if a guilty man is found guilty or guilty woman is convicted, hopefully they're just going to get just rewards. The concern is an innocent person being convicted on my watch, then the system's failed. And to me, and people love the adage, better that 9 guilty people go free than 1 innocent man go to prison. And this is the absolute truth, because when they're sitting there beside you and you just know that they're innocent, it's a great, great weight on your shoulders. It's always tough trying a case. Like I said, having an innocent person beside you, it's a great weight, and that's what puts the weight on and takes the hair off.